And now that we've discussed how to filter out certain groups of data, we now want to take a look at formulas to figure out how we can summarize that student achievement data within those specific groups that you've been able to filter for, okay? The main formula that we're going to use is going to be average, and that allows us to average the student achievement data within a class, within a race, within a gender. So you can look at these different groups, average their student achievement data, and then compare that to other groups and see what those numbers look like, okay? So what the average formula looks like is what you see displayed on the screen here. It's summarized as AVG, so that's what you're going to type. Anytime you want to average, you're going to click on the cell where you want that average to appear, and you're going to type this in. Any formula needs to start with an equal sign at the beginning. Then you tell the computer what you want it to do with the number, so you're going to say average. And then in parentheses, you're then going to input any cells that you want it to average. And you can do this one of two ways. You can literally hand type out every single cell you want it to average. If you're averaging 2 or 3 cells, this isn't a big deal. It's definitely very easy to do this. I would say cell A1, comma, A2, comma, A3, comma, A4. Because I've entered average at the beginning, it knows that what you want it to do with the 4 cells in parentheses separated by commas, you want it to add them together and then divide by the total number. Now, an alternative, if you're looking at large numbers of data, for example, 20 students, you might not want to type in 20 different cell addresses in the parentheses. In that case, you can enter a range. So if we look at the bottom example, we have equal, average, and then in parentheses, cell address A1 through A4. And now Excel knows that you want to include all cells in between this range. Okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at our 3 data samples, and we're going to use this formula, average, in all of them to see how it works to summarize our data. So we're going to start with data set A. We're going to go ahead and open that up. So like I mentioned before this one, the first category that we're going to look at is sex. So we're going to start by looking at the male data. Okay, so now we see all our male students, and we see in column AM, we have their overall score in percentage. Okay, so in order to get the overall average score for males, we're going to average all the percentages that we see here. Usually makes the most sense to just click the cell at the bottom of those, couple down. Okay, once I click on that cell, I'm going to begin typing in my formula. I'm going to type equals AVG. In parentheses, I'm going to select my first cell. If I look at the cell address there, it's AM4, so I'm going to type in AM4. Now, there are about 10 cells here that we're going to enter. However, I'm not going to enter the range because I filtered some out. If I enter AM4 through AM26, it's going to include the female students that I filtered out. So instead, I can either type them in. I'm going to hit comma, and then I could type AM7 as my next student. And we see that it highlighted that one in green. AM10, AM11, AM14, and so forth. I'm going to continue to enter the rest of my students. And then once I've entered the last student, which is AM26, I'm going to close the parentheses and I'm going to hit enter. Okay, and it looks like what it's doing, it's correcting. Here it shows me a little prompt that it found an error in my formula, and it looks like this version of Excel wants me to type out average. Some of them accept the abbreviation, some of them want you to type it out. So I'm going to say, yes, that's fine, everything else is correct. I'm going to let them change that to average, and it shows me that my average for males is 72%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I record this data somewhere. So I'm just going to type down here, I have some blank cells, and I'm going to write male 72%, okay? And now I'm going to delete that formula because this is the same place I'm going to want to enter a formula when I'm filtering for female students, okay? So now I'm going to go back up to my filter and I'm going to select female. I now see all my female students, and again, my male with 72% still remains down here in my blank cell. So I'm going to do the same thing for females, and I'm going to type in our formula here, and I'm going to write out average this time. And I'm going to start with AM5, comma, AM6, and I'm going to go ahead and type all of them in. When you're not filtering, you can use the range. So if you were just looking at the overall average, it would be really easy to type that range in. Because we filtered, we want to make sure that we're only getting the female data. So we're going to make sure to type all of them in. And then I'm going to close the parentheses, and we see my average for female students is 77%, a bit higher. And I'm going to type that down there. So now I've summarized my data by male and female simply by using filters and then formulas. Okay. I'm going to turn off that filter by saying show all. I now have all my students. But again, I still have this summarized data down here at the bottom in these cells. Eventually, you're going to put this in a more permanent place, but for now, you're just kind of taking notes as you collect that data. Okay, so that's what we're going to do for data set A. We've collected male versus female. We have an initial look at how their scores compare, overall scores. You could do the same thing when you're looking at these objectives. So you could compare male and female scores on your first objective, your second one, your third one. You would do that the same way. You'd filter males, and then rather than entering it in this cell here at the bottom of AM, you would enter it here at the bottom of W, and you would use the same exact formula to then summarize what male data looks like for this specific objective. And you could go through and do this for every objective that you have. Okay. So I'm going to close this one out, and I'm going to save the changes that we made because we're going to go ahead and use that for video 3. And we're going to open up data B, the corrected version. This one we're not going to look at sex, we're going to look at class period, okay? So we're going to start by filtering for class 1. And we see that the scholar's average score is in column L. So I'm going to enter here, and I'm going to go ahead and type my average formula in. And I'm going to type cell L21 is the first one that I'm looking at. L23, L24, L25, L26, L28, L29, and L30. Close the parentheses, and there we go, we have 86%. So I'm going to take notes down here. I'm going to say class period 1, and I'm going to say 86%. Okay? And now I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to scroll for class period 2. Now what you could do to make this a little bit easier, let's turn that filter off. I can order these in ascending order. This is going to make it easier because then when I search for class period 2, we notice that our cells go 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So I can use the range. Now let's see how that works. I'm going to hit equals, average. I'm still going to start with L12, but instead of typing in each individual cell, I'm going to put a colon, and now I'm going to say L19. We know that all the cells that we're looking at are in fact in order, so we're not including any numbers that we filtered out. These are all the ones that we want, and we see that we have 91% for class period 2. Next, we're going to be looking at class period 3 and class period 4. Okay, so I'm going to delete this value here. I've already jotted it down at the bottom. I'm going to look at class period 3. Again, I've already sorted them in ascending order, so we see that the numbers line up again. These are all right next to each other. So I'm going to do the same thing, equals, average. I'm going to start with cell L20. I'm going to do a colon to indicate that it's a range of cells, and it's going to go through L26. I'm going to close the parentheses, and I have 93 as my class period 3 average. And already we're noticing a trend. We see that as the day moves on, the scores are getting higher. So let's take a look at class period 4 and see if the trend continues. I'm going to do the same thing. Again, we've sorted in ascending order. These are all next to each other. So I can type in equals, average, start with cell L27, colon to indicate a range through cell L33. I'm going to put a parentheses to close it. And now we have 83%. This one's significantly lower than the class period before and closer to class period 1. Okay, so now you're able to very easily compare class periods 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to save these changes and turn this filter off so we're back to our original data. I'm going to save and close that out, and we're going to move on to our last one,